Morning light creeps across the jagged spine of Glacier National Park like a blade being unsheathed. Wind moves through the alpine firs, the sound so thin it could be mistaken for breath. That's where the last photograph of Emily Porter, age 29, was taken, before she and her camera disappeared for 11 years. Emily arrived in Montana on July 8, 2011. She had quit her commercial photography job in Portland 2 months earlier, telling friends she needed one clean summer away from deadlines and buildings. Her plan: hike a portion of the Highline Trail, spend 2 nights photographing glacial melt pools, then drive north toward Waterton. She texted her mother from the Swift Current Motor Inn. "No signal after this. Back Sunday. Love you." That was the last message she ever sent. 2 days later, hikers reported seeing a lone woman with a tripod near Grinnell Glacier overlook around 5 p.m. Morning, rangers found her rental Subaru still parked at the trailhead, windows rolled up, map on passenger seat, a thermos half full of coffee. The logbook inside the ranger station showed her signature, neat block letters, E. Porter, 1 camper, solo. When she didn't return by Monday, search teams mobilized. Helicopters traced the ridge, loud against the valley's hush. Dogs caught a brief scent along a snowfield that ended abruptly at a meltwater runoff. One of her hiking poles was discovered wedged in ice, the tip bent. Beyond that, nothing. Glacier swallowed her whole. For weeks, the story filled local headlines. Volunteers came from as far as Spokane. "Solo photographer likely fell into crevasse," one article guessed. Another said, "Sudden whiteout." After 3 months, the Park Service declared the case inactive. Her family held a vigil overlooking Lake McDonald, candles trembling in mountain wind. Her father, a quiet man in a worn ranger's jacket, told the reporters, "She wanted to see the park before it melted. Maybe she's part of it now." Years passed. Tourists forgot her name. New disappearances took her place. But inside Glacier, time keeps its own archive. 11 years later, September 2022, Park Ranger Noah Ellis hiked into the upper basin to inspect late-season runoff. It was unseasonably warm. Glacial ice that hadn't moved in decades was breaking apart, revealing things long sealed inside. Near the edge of a collapse zone, sunlight bounced off something metallic, caught between layers of frozen blue. At first, he thought it was trash, an old thermos cap maybe. Then he saw the outline, a digital camera, half encased in clear ice, lens pointing upward as if waiting. The strap had torn, but the body looked intact, sealed in its own little chamber of frost. He radioed headquarters. Found a camera at marker 17. Might be historic. By the time a recovery team arrived, the temperature had dropped below freezing again. They chipped the block free and carried it down in a cooler packed with dry snow. The brand was Canon EOS Rebel T2i, discontinued 2012. Serial number still legible. Inside the battery compartment, a corroded SD card sat dry beneath a frozen gasket. Noah logged the find as Artifact 2022 GLMP-17 camera, unknown owner. But something about the initials scratched faintly on the strap buckle stopped him. 2 letters, EP. At the forensic lab in Missoula, technicians thawed the ice slowly over several days. When they removed the card and slotted it into a reader, the folder tree appeared instantly. DCIM, July 2011, 102 GNP, 117 photographs. The first images were ordinary, trailhead markers, wildflowers, macro shots of insects on stone. Then came wide landscapes of ice fields under cloud shadow, exposure perfect, composition deliberate. Each timestamp placed her exactly where records had stopped. Grinnell Glacier overlook, late afternoon, July 9th, 2011. The final 12 photos changed everything. The metadata confirmed she'd been alive minutes after the storm began. The final timestamp, July 9th, 2011, 6:43 p.m. NOAA printed one of the earlier images, a panorama of the valley, with her faint reflection caught in the corner of the frame. She was documenting climate change, he told reporters later, and the glacier kept her work. News spread fast. The headline ran, "Ranger discovers camera frozen in ice. Possible link." They found fragments of tripod legs, a boot sole, a rusted thermos lid. No remains, only objects, like punctuation marks at the end of a long sentence. That autumn, NOAA hiked back to the site alone. Meltwater had carved a shallow stream through the spot where he'd found the camera. In the low sun, tiny bubbles in the ice refracted light like miniature prisms. He placed a small marker flag beside a cairn and wrote her name on it with permanent ink. "For EP, who saw before the rest of us," he murmured. He took one photograph, same angle as her last landscape, and stored it on his phone. Later that night, comparing both images side by side, he realized something uncanny. The shapes of the clouds above the ridge were nearly identical, as if time had frozen them in repetition. The recovered memory card went viral when released to the press. Viewers online pieced together her final journey frame by frame, overlaying maps, weather data, and path analysis. They noticed how the brightness in the last few shots seemed to shift, how her reflection appeared twice in the same exposure, like she'd turned the camera toward herself mid-storm. Amateur analysts called it the self-portrait of disappearance. But what struck professionals wasn't mystery, it was endurance. The glacier had preserved digital data against heat, pressure, and thaw cycles for over a decade, every pixel intact. A climatologist from the University of Montana wrote, "It's the most literal time capsule we've ever recovered from a melting glacier. Proof that nothing truly vanishes, it only waits for context." When reporters asked Emily's parents whether the discovery brought closure, her mother answered, "It brought her home in light, not in bones. That's enough." Her father, standing beside her, looked toward the mountain range and said, "She came here to show what was disappearing. She did. ... 11 years collapsed into a single frame, ice, light, and the memory of a shutter click. The glacier had kept her story sealed until the world was ready to listen. As NOAA descended from the ridge that evening, clouds gathered again over the peaks. Snowflakes began to fall, soft, slow, like static returning to an old recording. He glanced back once at the basin and saw the reflection of his own flashlight in the ice, flickering where the camera had been found. For an instant, it looked like a signal, then wind erased it. Winter tightened its hold on Glacier, and the basin where the camera had been found froze solid again. For months, snow buried the small flag NOAA had left there. When the melt returned the next spring, the glacier shifted, creaking like an old ship. Beneath the ice, it still held stories no one had read yet. The recovered memory card went to the National Forensic Archive in Helena. Engineers cleaned the contacts and ran deeper scans. Hidden inside the card was a secondary folder, an automatic backup created by the camera firmware. It contained 4 short video clips no one had noticed before. Each was only a few seconds long, likely taken accidentally when the camera switched modes. The first clip showed Emily setting up her tripod near a blue ridge, humming to herself. The wind made her voice tremble. The second was of snowflakes melting on the lens, the sound of distant thunder. The third showed her glove brushing ice crystals from the camera screen, then tilting upward toward the sky. The fourth clip, recorded less than 5 minutes before the final still photo, captured her saying, barely audible, "Clouds breaking. I think I see it." After that, the card logged no further input. When the lab sent the findings to park headquarters, NOAA printed the still frames from those clips and tacked them on the board beside the original photos. To him, they looked like an unfinished sentence waiting for a period. He met with Dr. Maya Chen, a glaciologist from the university who had studied the retreat of Grinnell Glacier for 10 years. Together, they retraced Emily's path using topographic overlays and melt records. Maya pointed to a shaded section on the 2011 satellite image. This corridor didn't exist until the following year. She could have been standing over a hollow without realizing it. Meltwater moves fast. It opens a throat under the ice and swallows everything. Noah nodded, and when the ice sealed again, it froze the camera where it fell. For weeks, he replayed the footage in his head, the humming, the storm, that final line. "I think I see it." What had she seen? A break in clouds, the end of her trail, or something she had come for all along. Her photographs went public in a small gallery curated by the Park Service. Visitors stood before prints of her glacier studies, each image framed with her initials and the coordinates of where it had been taken. A plaque near the entrance read, "Preserved in ice, from 2011 to 2022. Recovered by Ranger N. Ellis." Among the visitors was Dana Keller, a woman in her 30s who introduced herself as Emily's former roommate. She brought an envelope containing undeveloped film rolls Emily had mailed from Portland weeks before her final trip. On one roll was a photo of the sketch taped to Emily's wall, a rough map of Glacier National Park with a handwritten caption, "Where water remembers." Dana told Noah, she wasn't chasing beauty. She was chasing proof. She wanted to show how ice stores memory, trapped bubbles of old air, even sounds. That phrase, "where water remembers," began circulating online, transforming Emily into a kind of symbol for lost explorers and environmental recorders. Some called her the glacier's archivist. Others accused the park of exploiting tragedy for tourism. Noah avoided interviews. He just kept hiking the trails she had photographed, noting each melt pattern, taking his own pictures quietly. By midsummer, meltwater levels dropped enough for a new survey team to enter the crevasse field. They found fragments of fabric wedged between boulders, a section of dark gray jacket with a camera mount sewn into the chest strap. DNA confirmed it belonged to Emily. There was no body, only the material memory of one. The discovery allowed officials to close the missing persons case formally. Yet it didn't end the story. That fall, the Park Service began receiving anonymous envelopes. Inside each was a printed photo from the recovered camera with no return address. The first showed the glacier at dawn. The second, the shadow of her tripod. The third, her face turned toward a distant peak. On the back of the final photo was a line typed neatly. The mountain kept its promise. Investigators traced the prints to a local photo lab used by the university, but no one claimed responsibility. Noah suspected Dana, though he never asked. Something about the gesture felt right, like returning a lost heartbeat to the landscape. As winter came again, he hiked to Grinnell Overlook once more. The glacier had retreated another 30 feet, leaving a shallow pool the color of glass. He crouched beside it and set down one of the printed photos, Emily's self-portrait. It floated for a moment before the wind pushed it under, disappearing into ripples. The sound of water beneath the ice was faint, but steady, like breathing through stone. He turned on his radio and said quietly, "Marker 17 secure. Weather calm." Then softer, almost to himself, "She's still here." That night, back at the ranger cabin, he listened to the audio from the recovered video again. Between the hiss of wind and thunder, he heard something new, a faint echo, maybe an accidental reflection of her voice bouncing through the glacier. He slowed the file and amplified it. The words came through like whispers traveling through snow. "Keep recording." He leaned back, headphones slipping, heart hammering. The rest of the team would call it interference. But he knew better. Emily had always been documenting everything, even the moment the mountain answered her. He saved the file under a new name, Where Water Remembers Final Cut. Outside, the night froze clear and silent. Somewhere beneath miles of ice, a current moved, carrying her last word forward. Spring returned with the sound of meltwater whispering under the ice. Snow retreated from the ridges and the park came alive again. Every thaw felt like the mountain breathing. For most visitors, Glacier was just a postcard of wilderness. For Noah, it had become something else entirely, a living archive of one woman's unfinished work. The recovered photographs were now part of a traveling exhibit called Where Water Remembers. It toured museums across the Northwest, drawing lines of visitors who studied each frame as though looking into a time capsule. People lingered at the final self-portrait longer than any other image. Emily's face, half-lit, hair wet, eyes fixed on something beyond the frame. Below it, a small caption read, Recovered July 2022. Final exposure July 9th, 2011. Photographer, Emily Porter. At one showing in Missoula, a child asked her mother why Emily smiled even though the storm was coming. The mother said, maybe she knew what she was seeing would never happen again. Back at Glacier, Noah continued to hike her route once a month, partly for research, partly for company. He carried her printed panorama, folded in a waterproof sleeve, and always took one matching photograph from the same point on the trail. Year after year, the glacier receded in his pictures, blue ice becoming gray gravel, meltwater streams carving deeper channels. The difference between 2011 and 2023 looked like decades instead of years. One morning, he found the ice around marker 17 had split open again, revealing a small cavity beneath the ridge. Inside the hollow, he saw a glint of metal and reached in with a gloved hand. It was the tripod mount from Emily's camera, the one missing since the recovery. It had fused to a layer of ice that cracked away easily now. When he lifted it, light bounced through the translucent piece like glass, throwing faint rainbows on the snow. He laughed softly, surprised at how fragile it felt. Guess you weren't done showing me things, he said. He placed the mount in his pack and took one more photograph from the spot, lining the horizon exactly as she had. When he checked the display, his own reflection shimmered faintly where hers once had. Same ridge, same frame, 11 years apart. That summer, the Park Service invited him to speak at the reopening of the Grinnell Glacier Observation Center, newly rebuilt after a decade of erosion. He talked not about loss, but about persistence, how the ice had preserved her work, how the camera had waited like a patient witness. He told the audience, Emily's camera taught us that every disappearance is just a pause until something decides to thaw. After the ceremony, he walked to the overlook, where tourists snapped selfies and children threw snowballs. Beneath the laughter, he could hear the same low hum that had filled the recovered video. Wind across melting ice, the world slowly recording itself. At the base of the memorial plaque, he left the tripod mount, placing it beside a small brass tag inscribed with her initials. For a moment, sunlight hid both pieces and the reflection flashed upward, cutting across the snow like a signal. Cameras clicked behind him, but no one noticed the shimmer fade. Emily's parents visited later that year. They hiked halfway up the trail, slower now, holding hands as they went. Her mother wore one of Emily's old scarves, still smelling faintly of pine and film chemicals. At the overlook, they found the mount where Noah had left it, half encased in ice again. Her father touched it gently. She would have liked this, he said. Nothing stays still, not even the things that look frozen. They watched as sunlight poured through the clouds, warming the glacier's face. Streams began to trickle down the slope, tiny rivers cutting through decades of packed snow. It's like she's taking another picture, her mother whispered. Noah stayed back, letting them have the silence. He thought of the last words on the audio file. Keep recording. It struck him that maybe Emily hadn't meant it for herself at all. Maybe it was meant for anyone who found her story later. A reminder that memory doesn't stop when people disappear. It only waits for new witnesses. That night, after guiding them back to camp, he opened his laptop and began cataloging his own photos. Every shot he'd taken since finding the camera. He organized them into folders by year: 2022, 2023, 2024. Under each, he labeled the location, weather, temperature, and light conditions, just as Emily had done. In the notes section, he wrote, "Continuing documentation per request of EP." When he exported the images, he noticed one file from earlier in the day looked different. The light around the glacier shimmered with an odd flare, almost like a reflection from another lens. Zooming in, he saw faint concentric circles, an optical echo created when sunlight bounced between his camera and the ice wall. It looked exactly like the glare on Emily's final photograph. He stared at it for a long time. Then he smiled. "Okay," he said aloud. Still recording. In 2025, a major melt event caused Grinnell's lower basin to release millions of gallons of trapped water overnight. Rangers rushed to monitor flooding. When the waters cleared days later, they found that the pool beneath Marker 17 had deepened into a new lagoon. Beneath several feet of transparent ice sat the faint outline of what looked like a piece of fabric, blue, smooth, with the edge of a zipper. The team marked the coordinates, but decided not to excavate. Noah understood. The glacier had already told its story. To disturb it again would be to rewrite the ending. He returned in early autumn, alone, as the first snow began to fall. Standing at the edge of the lagoon, he could see the distant reflection of his own figure blurred by the ice. It shimmered beside another darker shape that might have been a trick of the light or something preserved just below the surface. He raised his camera, but didn't press the shutter. Some images were meant to stay unfinished. The wind shifted, carrying the echo of meltwater moving through cracks below. It sounded like film running through a reel, soft and steady. He whispered into the cold air, "You're still here," and listened as the glacier answered in its quiet rhythm. The documentary about the discovery aired the next year. It opened with Emily's final still photograph and ended with Noah's matching panorama. The closing narration read, "She went looking for what was disappearing and became part of what endures. The glacier did not take her. It remembered her, and through her, it remembers us." The final shot drifted over the ice at dusk. Light glinted on the lagoon, reflecting twice. 2 points of brightness that pulsed, merged, and faded into blue shadow. Then, silence. The credits rolled over the sound of slow dripping water, each drop echoing like a heartbeat. For the first time in more than a decade, Glacier National Park felt less like a tomb and more like an archive, one still being written by wind, by melt, by the click of a shutter somewhere in the distance. And though the last image was nothing but light on ice, it carried her voice within it, whispering through the frozen air, "Keep recording."